97.18% for Staley, 2.8% against. But if you include those who abstained, 14%, 84% of all ballots.
That's right, yeah.
For Staley. A good number if you're Jez Staley and the board, or not?
Well, it's a good number in the sense that if it was below 50, he'd be out of a job. So there will be a slight sense of relief. I don't think anyone ever thought there was a legitimate chance of him going today. But 14% of shareholders abstaining from your re-election whilst they wait for these regulatory investigations into the whistleblower scandal that emerged last month is certainly not a great result. Last year, he got 99%.
One of the shareholder bodies, ISS, of course, recommended shareholders abstain until we get the result of those regulatory investigations. That's the key. I mean, he still might lose his job.
Exactly. Well, we just came from the AGM in London earlier on today, where Chairman John McFarlane, who, remember, is in charge of Staley's future, gave him some very public backing again. And he said something along the lines of, if you jump a stop sign and you don't cause an accident, you only get 3 points on your license. They don't take your license away. That's how he was saying the board are kind of looking at this. This is a misstep. Fortunately, Staley never actually managed to identify a whistleblower, which had been a bigger deal. But certainly this is a bloody nose for Barclays, Jez Staley and the rest of the board.
Stock down about 8% this year. Is this a carte blanche for Staley to continue as he's doing?
Well, Staley didn't have the best first quarter. He gave some very public backing to the investment bank, which absorbs a lot of the capital of the unit. And it didn't perform well in trading, as a lot of the US and European peers did. So in addition to the questions over his own temperament and his suitability to run the bank, he's also facing questions on whether the investment bank is justifying the faith put in him. But certainly, this is the shareholders out of the way. They've then got to get past the regulators.
Shareholders is, Stephen, you know, there's major shareholders and then there's more minor shareholders that have a bigger voice. Were there some minor shareholders that made a dent in maybe Staley's reputation, or at least put some questions out there that people took notice of?
Well, when we went to the AGM today, there's less than 1% of the voting shares actually represented in the room. Most of it's done by proxy before by the big shareholders. There were a few hints at protest today. One small shareholder called for Jez Staley to resign, but overall, this is probably the best of a bad situation for them at the moment. They will be looking to put this behind them, but we've still got several months of this regulatory investigation to get through first.
John McFarlane also spoke. He said our priority is to close that gap to book value. I mean, you always forget about these. In a normal environment, we'd be banging on about that gap, wouldn't be, daily?
Exactly.
But obviously, other matters have taken precedence, such as this. This whistleblower saga. I mean, that in itself is not a good stat, is it?
No, and a few shareholders did mention their returns today. Remember, the dividend was cut in half last year to give them some space to sell their Africa operations and to get rid of all the toxic and unwanted assets they have. So really, there is still a big gap. I mean, 2 years ago, Chairman John McFarlane promised to double the share price in the next 3 to 4 years, and it's currently below where it was when he said that. So he clearly thought the mountain was slightly smaller than it actually turned out to be.
Does Barclays need Staley more than Staley needs Barclays? I've seen a bit of commentary on that in recent weeks. What's the verdict?
Well, certainly one of the reasons he's been cushioned from this scandal is that broadly shareholders, large and small, do think he's doing a good job. Certainly a better job in terms of the arena of public opinion than a lot of his predecessors as CEO. But I guess when you think about it, it all comes down to whether this bet on the investment bank pays off. If he's right and he recovers and they have enough scale to compete with Wall Street, then it'll all be great. If he's wrong, then we're going to see a slow erosion of value in the business over time, and that'll call into question his judgment on business as well as personnel matters.